Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I grew up in Texas, and I was a member of the Methodist Church down there. And it was I was a teenager during the Second World War. And the, but I went to college at the University of Texas, and there was a very active student Methodist group at the campus, and what the paid person there was a pacifist, and he we learned a good bit about the horrors of war, of course, during those years. And both my husband-to-be and I were active with this group. And after my junior year, there was an opportunity to go to a work camp up in the north to do housing repair help in a poor neighborhood. I majored in sociology, and one of the major things that I studied was the issue of segregation and the issue of the difficulties of people of color. And I signed up for this to go. And my father, when he found out that it was going to be interracial, told me he would not finance my going. And if I went, he would not finance the rest of my college education. And I folded at that point. But when we moved to Troy in 1968, we joined the Quaker meeting because it was the Quakers that had these things that I couldn't go to. We went to a conference in Denmark, and then we did a study tour of Czechoslovakia. And there we learned the story of the little village that had been completely wiped out by the Germans during the war, and all of the men killed and the women, most of them were also shot, and the children were taken, if they looked at all Germanic, and given to mothers in Germany. And that really brought to me, especially since I hadn't been in any part of the fighting, what war does. So that was one of the things that caused us to especially deal with preventing warfare. One of the things we did was to take a trip across the country, taking polls, asking people if they were in favor of nuclear abolition. We'd go to street corners and take polls, and then we'd go get arrangements with the church to come and talk to them about the issue. And almost up in the 80s and 90s, people said, oh, yes, we should abolish nuclear weapons. So the idea was to get local governments to pass resolutions about that. So they had a weekly vigil down at the Capitol and passed out leaflets about war and peace. And so that was has been ongoing. Learn from people of color, what they've been through, what they still have to go through. Overcome your hesitation to deal with this issue. Well, I think that I learned the most and felt that it was very useful to me to live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in a black neighborhood with a black landlady, with going to meetings and organizations run by people of color, and have some of the work having resolutions passed by the local government, and that taught me so much about what still exists in our country, the whole difficulty with racism. So it was the thing that I had hoped to work to eliminate. And I did have an opportunity to be on committees that were doing useful things with redlining of housing and other issues on the committee here in Troy that I worked on. So I think that's what I hope was a useful part of my activities. So. Well, as I've said, I have grandchildren now and great-grandchildren. And the possibility that still exists of nuclear holocaust is worrying. And I hoped that I would live to see that removed in the world.